If you're someone who never posts photos online, no selfies, no updates, no trace of your personal life, you've probably been told you're weird, antisocial, maybe even hiding something. But you're not weird, you're not hiding, and you're definitely not antisocial. You're actually doing something that most people on social media can't. Social media is a 24/7 performance stage, and while everyone else is performing, you chose the exit door. But here's what's interesting. Psychology says the reason you did that goes much deeper than you think. And for some of you, it started long before social media even existed. Let's break it down. While most people curate their online image like a full-time job, you chose privacy. And that's not cold, that's clear. Psychologists call this a high privacy orientation. A 2019 study published in a major medical journal found that people with high conscientiousness, the ones who think before they act, are naturally more protective of their privacy online. It's not a choice you made one day, it's literally who you are. Wild, right? So when someone asks, why don't you ever post anything? What they're really asking is, why don't you need the attention that I need? And you don't owe them an answer. You're not invisible, you're intentional. But here's the thing, privacy is just the surface. There is something deeper going on. Back in 1996, psychologist Jennifer Campbell at the University of British Columbia created something called the Self-Concept Clarity Scale. And here's what she found. People who know exactly who they are don't need the outside world to confirm it. Think of it this way. Most people use social media like a mirror. They post something and they wait for likes, for comments, for someone to reflect back to them who they are. You don't do that. You already have a window. You look out, you observe, you take things in, but you don't need the reflection. That doesn't mean you don't care what people think. It means your identity isn't built on what people think. And honestly, that kind of inner clarity is rarer than you'd expect. And it goes further than identity. Here's something psychologists don't say enough. There are two types of self-esteem: fragile self-esteem, which needs constant feeding, and secure self-esteem, which stands on its own. A 2021 study in the Journal of Communication found that social media use is linked to lower self-esteem. But here's the twist. It depends on the person. If your self-esteem is already secure, social media barely touches it. You're not avoiding social media because you're insecure. You're avoiding it because you don't need it to feel whole. Your shield is already intact. Quick question, does any of this sound like you? If so, keep watching, because what comes next might change how you see yourself. Here's the thing, everything I just said, it's true, but it's not the whole truth. Not everyone who avoids posting is doing it from a place of strength. Someone once left a comment on this channel that stopped me in my tracks. They wrote, I stopped posting photos 3 years ago. Not because I found inner peace, because every time I saw my own face on screen, I remembered every comment my classmates made about how I looked. That's not privacy. That's protection from old wounds. Not posting because you're secure, that's a boundary. Not posting because you're ashamed, that's a wall. And there's a difference. So which one are you? Are you choosing privacy or avoiding visibility? Be honest with yourself, because the answer matters. If that hit close to home, that's okay. Recognizing it is the first step. That's not weakness, that's awareness. And for most of you who chose privacy from a healthy place, here's where it gets interesting. Carl Rogers, one of the most influential psychologists of the 20th century, believed the answer starts in childhood. He called it conditions of worth. Basically, when you grow up in a home where love came with conditions, where you had to look a certain way, act a certain way, perform a certain way to be accepted, you learned something early. Being visible comes with a price. Maybe you had a parent who was critical, not cruel, just hard to impress, so you stopped trying to impress anyone. Or maybe you were the responsible one, the one everyone leaned on, and somewhere along the line, you learned that your role was to hold space for others, not to take up space yourself. And somewhere along the line, you decided, consciously or not, that the safest thing to do was to keep your real self out of sight. Not because you were weak, but because you were protecting something most people have already given away. And that instinct, psychology has a name for it. Rogers called it the internal locus of evaluation. It basically means you judge yourself by your own standards, not the world's. While most people scroll through social media asking, "Am I enough?" you already decided the answer, and you didn't need a single like to get there. Rogers believed that the healthiest people are those who stopped looking outside for approval and started trusting what was already inside them. Wild, right? The thing society calls weird is actually what psychology calls evolved. Let that sink in. And here's the real kicker. There's one more reason you don't post, and it explains everything about the world you're living in right now. In 1954, psychologist Leon Festinger discovered something about human nature that explains everything about social media today. He called it social comparison theory. We can't help measuring ourselves against others, and social media turned that instinct into a 24/7 hamster wheel. But you broke the wheel. You opted out of the game entirely. And Georgetown University found that cutting back on social media improves mental health as much as therapy. Let that sink in. You're not missing out. You're opting out. And there's a massive difference. So let's bring this full circle. You don't post photos not because you're hiding, not because you're antisocial, and not because something is wrong with you. You value privacy over performance. Your sense of self doesn't depend on likes. And for many of you, this was shaped long before you had a choice. One of the top comments on a video about this exact topic, with 28,000 likes, said, "What type of world do we live in that not showing your photos to the entire world is considered weird?" 28,000 people agreed. You're not alone. So here's your permission slip. You don't have to post. You don't have to perform. You don't have to prove who you are to anyone who isn't willing to sit across from you and actually listen. In a world that rewards the loudest voice, you chose to stay in a quiet room, not because you had nothing to say, but because you didn't need an audience to know your own worth. And that's the proof that depth still exists. If any of this resonated with you, drop a comment and tell me when you first realized you were different from most people online. And if you want more conversations like this, subscribe. I think the next one will hit even closer to home.